Today is the first day of this February 1984 7-day retreat. Before coming to our main topic, which is comparison in connection with the koan, let's say something about listening to a talk and authority of a teacher. Since this talk and talks like these are not informative, they are not given to convey information to you, or to persuade you to adopt a line of thinking or believing. Can one listen to them in a new way? In a way which is free from set, fixed grooves? Just as there is work on the part of myself not to speak in fixed, set grooves, but to see what is being said, to look at it, trying to find the best suitable words, which are never completely suitable. So can there be open listening without resistance? Not making the person who is speaking into any kind of an authority, which she is not. Making her into authority would mean what she says needs to be done, imitated, acted out, accomplished. All of that is not what these words are all about. One may project this onto them and either do what one thinks she says I should do, or imitate, or fight the authority. These words are spoken so all of us can partake in this looking and listening and finding out for oneself, for ourselves, what is actually so. Mostly within ourselves, this is where most of these talks start from and end in. One may feel, why is she talking about authority again? For me it is clear, it's a finished subject. One must never assume that anything is clear for oneself once and for all. The assumption already takes space in the mind. But if there's no assumption and the mind is free to look, one need not even say again, because what was is not now. To look. In freedom. In the freedom from the authority of one's own past experience, which can be the subtlest of all authorities, what I know to be so, what I have myself experienced to be so in the past? Can all of that be questioned? Meaning not dwelt upon, defended, or inattentively taken to be so, taken for granted? It will not be if the whole mind is in a state of not knowing, doubting, questioning, attending. If one finds, as some people have reported, that the voice of Toni keeps following one around like a record, can one look at that too without immediately thinking it's wrong or it's right, it's good or bad? Why is it so? Is it just like any other record that plays at times of music or memories? If it's not one, it's another. Or is there still this hidden feeling I ought to do what she says? Which is mental preoccupation. Rather than looking at this instant, at a voice running and oneself being influenced or at a loss of what to do about it, or hating it, or blaming it on the person who does the speaking. Can everything come into question? Why do I listen to this voice? Do I seek something from it? Do I want it to do something for me? Wake me up? Have something there instead of nothing? What is nothing without grabbing for something? Or if this voice, as some people say, is persistent, then rather than being preoccupied with the fact of the voice speaking, what is it that said? Can I see that right now? Either that it is so or that it is not so. If I see it as so, then what importance has a voice to me? None. I don't see what this statement that buzzes around in the mind, why can't I see it? Why can't I be seeing? Rather than worrying about the voice, can the inability to understand the nagging discomfort with this, knowing without seeing, can that fuel the work? This work of what is it, or who, or attending, questioning, in the midst of the discomfort of whatever. We were going to talk about comparison today. There's a koan in the Mumonkan taken from Shibayama's comments on the Mumonkan. It's number 26 and is entitled "Two Monks Rolled Up the Bamboo Blinds." The monks gathered in the hall to hear the great Hogan of Serio give teisho before the midday meal. Hogan pointed to the bamboo blinds. At this, two monks went to the blinds and rolled them up alike. Hogan said, "One has it, the other has not." Mumon's commentary reads, "Tell me, which one has it and which one has not?" If you have your Zen eye opened at this point, you will then know how Master Serio failed. Be that as it may, you are strictly warned against arguing about has and has not. And Mumon's poem says, "When they are rolled up, bright and clear is the great emptiness. The great emptiness does not yet come up to our teaching. Why don't you cast away emptiness and everything? Then it is so lucid and perfect that even the wind does not pass through." The monks gathered in the hall to hear the great Hogan of Serio give teisho before the midday meal. I looked it up in another translation, and there it also said the great Serio. Here it is capitalized great, in the other translation it is a small great. And yet there it stands. And may have its impact upon the reader or the listener. One wonders if there's any need to have any such attributes given to a person who happens to speak before the midday meal, even though he is an abbot or a teacher. Just watch what it does to one when one hears the great Serio said. What did he say? I'd like to hear that. Not whether somebody calls him great. May have all kinds of motives for doing that. To convince you that what you're going to hear is right. I'm not saying Mumon does that. But why any attribute? It invites comparison rather than listening. Because the important thing is not whether this man is great or greater than another one, or not quite as great, but whether there be understanding here in myself. Of what the words are about. We're so conditioned, all of us, since time immemorial, to try to promote something or somebody. For our own sake, really, if we look. Somebody once said, if you belong to religion, be convinced that you belong to the best one. Or else he won't give you life and soul and heart and everything to it, unless you're really convinced it is tops. Again, see, where does the importance lie? If you think what you belong to is tops, you're also trying to promote it, proselytize, and compare your teacher with another teacher. Does one see that as it happens? That's the only important thing. Not how people come out on a comparative scale, but that one understands this whole phenomenon of comparison. By looking into oneself, it takes place there, firsthand, almost all the time. And also understand whether there may be some comparison which is valid and necessary. Maybe choosing one design for a house over another design. One has to compare locations and sunshine and noise, street noise and things. Because one needs to build a good building. In a case like that, comparison is necessary. It's not the comparison that is talked about here. The psychological comparison of who is better, who is stronger, who is more enlightened, more developed, less advanced, and all the hierarchical structuring that goes with it. The following at the expense of looking within into the human mind that does all this comparing and wanting to belong to the best and strongest, for fear of facing the insecurity of weakness, inadequacy, and not knowing. Listen. Hogan pointed to the bamboo blinds. At this, two monks went to the blinds and rolled them up alike. There was no exchange of words, which is not necessary. If the pointer and the person to whom something is pointed out see it and understand what is meant by the gesture, and the gesture is simple and has nothing extra, it is sufficient in itself and is understood this way, then there is sometimes a real beauty in not needing words. Because one sees the same thing and sees what needs to be done and does it. In such a complete thing of pointing, seeing, and doing, there is no need for approval. The completion is sufficient, is totally sufficient. Here one doesn't know whether there was something extra or not, whether there is any authority of the teacher who points and watches who is watching. Whether there's any fear of, will I do it right? If the teacher is not in a position of authority, he may get by with just pointing to something in front of an assembled hall. May not be misinterpreted or misfelt, but it could easily be a very authoritative gesture. You have to know what I mean the moment I raise my hand and do it. So if one is in any supervisory function, to be aware of one's gestures, if they have the simplicity of just pointing to what the other person also understands, and there is nothing extra in that. One may sense if a person feels treated inferiorly because one has just pointed at something without saying something, and then one can discuss it to make clear nothing. It had nothing to do with any kind of status that one was impressing upon somebody else. But one has to be very clear that it does not, before saying that it does not. Sometimes one person points to something the other person doesn't understand, and the person will point again, and the implication is, how dumb! Don't you see? So to be aware, not just within, but of the other person, of the whole system. And flexible. If one feels somebody doesn't understand, hasn't understood, to immediately shift, not insist that the other person come around, but to try to communicate. Without anything extra. coming back to the case here, Hogan pointed to the bamboo blinds, which were down, they were lowered. Two monks went to the blinds and rolled them up alike. And he said, one has it, the other has not. If one would put oneself into the situation which is presented here for all of us to look at, as though we ourselves are in it, are all the actors. Someone from the highest seat has pointed to something and two people go up and one rolls up these bamboo blinds in full view of everybody. A lot can take place in that scenario. Without even having heard yet the comment of Serio, there may be already the thought, am I doing it better than the other? And there may be things at a particular place that are valued, that one knows the teacher likes, neatness, or energy, or both, or attentiveness, slowness. Each place has sort of its, you give the word, you know. Something that one thinks is valued as a value, as sort of a sign of good work. So are the monks conforming to an idea, to an ideal of how to properly roll up blinds in the sight of everyone? Maybe teaching people at the same time a little bit how these blinds should be rolled up if they're really rolled up properly. The image of the perfect blind uproller. We know all that from ourselves. The security that a set way of doing things gives, with approval in the wings, or the fear of disapproval, therefore a certain nervousness maybe. Oh, one has done it so many times, one isn't nervous about it anymore. One knows one does it right and well. What will get one out of this straitjacket of images and imitation and doing something for the sake of reward and avoidance of punishment? First of all, and maybe last of all, one has to see what's going on. With a mind that is anchored in no values at all. Neither the value of neatness nor the value of sloppiness. It can be just as much a value as neatness. I once saw a little boy, he was very little, with a huge map that had been left open, was lying on the floor, had a few tear spots, it was not new. And he went about to fold up that map. Fortunately, nobody, particularly the parents, were observing him. So he had all the time and all the space to himself. He was totally into it, and went with the feel of there's still some power in those folds that he could feel. And if it went against that, he'd open it up again. And he got that whole map together. It was incredible. And since hadn't been a task set by anybody and no one was invested in the child's progress or accomplishments, there was and no one had hardly seen it, there was no praise, and he didn't expect any. But he glowed when that map was put together. So maybe, we don't know, maybe these two monks rolled up these blinds as a blind will roll up. If one is free to roll it up, as it will roll up naturally, and then this bombshell, one has it, the other has not. Which is an enormous challenge put out by Serio to the monks and to the whole audience. Are you with it? You are that monk or that person who just rolled up this thing? And here the teacher says one has it and the other has not. What goes on in the mind? Or is the mind free to just hear the words? And the challenge, and see that it is that? One may look back, is this thing rolled up properly? Yes, it is. As a matter of fact, it's rolled up just the same way the other one is. Or does this hook into a mystique of having something? If one thinks one is the one he was referring to, one may start imagining that one really has something, because he says so. Or the other has something, and if I strive as hard as he does, maybe I'll have that too. Or, what is much more likely, jealousy coming up, discomfort, insecurity at not having what the other one has, or pride at having what the other one has not. total opening of Pandora's box, such a statement, which is fine if one is free to look, free to examine, be with the discomfort if it follows, and look into that. In the audience, does it result in a guessing game who has something? And observing it further, yeah, he must have been the one he meant because of what he does here now. Again, projecting onto people what one thinks is the teacher's view of that person. Development, it used to be called. Does one see projection at work in oneself? Which means what really appears in this person, how he really is blocked out by the projection of what one thinks he is or has, because the teacher says so. Because it's a very, very clever thing to what is happening here. Arousing it by leaving the whole thing open, nothing to grab onto except thoughts and projections. Are they seen though? I want to be the one. I hope I'm not the wrong one. In the eyes of whom? Can one work, sit, roll up shades, clean the floor, cut the celery or the lettuce, totally for its own sake, not to impress a supervisor or to impress oneself of one's superiority in comparison to the other one who seems to be so much slower, so much less efficient. Will one watch this wounding and hurting power of comparison and the division it creates between the good ones and the poor ones, or the better and worse ones? If one is depressed about oneself, what is at work? Isn't it comparison with the way one felt yesterday? Or the way other people seem to be feeling and not measuring up either to how one felt or how one thinks one ought to feel or how one thinks other people are feeling. Look at it when it comes up. And in the looking and observing, can it free itself of all comparison? You may find you're putting down 100,000-pound burden. Not only a burden, but the blinders, because as long as comparison takes on, one does not really look at what is, which is incomparable, cannot be compared. If it's compared, it isn't seen for what it is. We're not talking of house models right now, but of getting in touch with what is actually happening and functioning and taking place in oneself, causing misery and sorrow, or pride and arrogance, envy or jealousy. Mumon says, tell me which one has it and which one has not. What is your answer? Is it even an answerable question? So often, just because somebody asks a question, we give an answer, because that's what you do with questions. You answer them. We're so trained and drilled. Little children, sometimes if they don't answer, they get admonished. Well, answer. He asked you something. Teachers are always happy when children raise their hands a lot and answer. Makes her or him feel better, more effective. And children know that. They try to make the teacher feel at ease, or happy, or the parent. And not listen to a question and not know immediately, but look and question oneself. Mumon says, if you have your Zen eye opened at this point, you will then know how Master Serio failed. In simple words, does one see the whole situation, or is one caught up in comparison and wanting praise, and wanting to follow, and wanting to have an answer for a demanding teacher? And does one see all this wanting? I always go deeper and deeper and deeper to scoop it all up, the whole thing. I go, transplanting a tree, you have to scoop up wide and deep, so you get the whole thing, every little rootlet. Because maybe you'll say, oh, and not every rootlet is necessary. So maybe it's a poor comparison. But in oneself to dig till there's nothing left. Nothing avoided, nothing run away from. And this warning against having and not having. You're warned against arguing about has and has not. Does it mean don't ever say that, don't ever argue about it? Or does it mean, let me look how often I use this thing? And what do I really mean by it? What's all involved in that? I don't have it. I don't have what it needs, some people say. What does that mean, a statement like this? Is this a factual statement? Or is it an expression of discouragement, which comes out of comparison? And can one let it go, seeing what it is? Not barricade oneself in with images. But give everything the doubt. What does it mean having something or not having something? Maybe totally meaningless words, alluding to a reality that likewise is meaningless. So can one put aside all the stuff one has heard that which should have or get, and question into nothing? Meaning nothing describable, explainable, knowable. Always putting the words aside. And just who or mu, or what is it? Attending, questioning, not knowing. Listen. What is that? We will end here for today.